Before we begin, I want to invite you into a story that starts in the quiet moments we often overlook: a flicker of courage, a question asked at the wrong time, and a single winter night where 3 lives crossed in the most unexpected way. It's a story about truth, about the weight it carries and the people who risk everything just to speak it out loud. And at the center of it all is a man who wanted nothing more than a peaceful life for his daughter, and a woman who is about to discover that power means nothing if you can't trust yourself. What happened next would change far more than they imagined. So sit back, get comfortable, and let this journey unfold one breath at a time. The cockpit was drowning in sound. A shrill alarm pulsed like a heartbeat gone wrong. Somewhere behind it, a metallic rattle vibrated through the frame of the aircraft, faint but unmistakable, like a giant exhaling through clenched teeth. The co-pilot's breathing turned uneven, sharp, and clipped. Then a calm voice broke through, forced calm, the kind of tone only pilots were trained to use when the world tilted sideways. Mayday. Mayday. Fuel imbalance on Engine 2. Request immediate vectors to nearest runway. A long, uneasy crackle followed. The cabin behind them stirred hushed whispers growing into a wave of rising fear. A flight attendant's voice floated through the intercom, steady but trembling underneath. "Ladies and gentlemen, please remain seated. We're experiencing a minor technical." The alarm cut her off. Then, over everything else, came the voice of a news anchor, smooth practiced, carrying the detachment of someone reading a tragedy from the safety of a studio. 7 years ago, engineer Evan Brooks was at the center of the fuel system controversy that shook the aviation industry. His warnings were dismissed. Investigations concluded he exaggerated the threat. Brooks was removed from the project and later left the field entirely. His voice faded into static. Darkness swallowed the cockpit whole. Christmas Eve. Present day. Soft jazz drifted through the rooftop restaurant like a warm exhale, slow saxophone clinking glassware, low conversations blending into a gentle hum. Outside the tall windows, the city shimmered under winter air, but inside it was all warmth. Soft laughter, distant silverware tapping porcelain, the faint rustle of someone adjusting a coat. And at a table set for 2 sat Alexandra Vale. Her breathing had that quiet rhythm of someone trying too hard to appear composed. The red dress she wore whispered whenever she shifted, just a small silky sound, but beneath it her heartbeat felt loud enough to echo. She checked her watch again, then scolded herself silently. "You're Alexandra Vale. You run an empire. You negotiate with governments. And yet you're anxious about a blind date. Pull yourself together." A chair scraped nearby. Heavy footsteps. Then a man cleared his throat. Her date. Well-dressed, confident in a rehearsed way, his cologne carried that sharp, assertive scent men chose when they wanted to smell expensive. He sat without waiting for her invitation. "Alexandra Vale," he said, almost tasting her last name. "The woman who terrifies half of Wall Street. I guess I should feel honored." She offered a polite smile. "Let's try to be 2 normal people tonight. No boardrooms, no headlines." But he laughed a little too loudly. "Normal? You a scoff, Alexandra. Your problem is you don't know how to be anything but in charge. You're intense, controlling, cold even." He said it like he was reading a diagnosis. She inhaled slowly. The jazz faded behind a ringing in her ears. He went on unfazed. "My mother really wanted us to meet. Something about you being a strong match. Honestly, you're not my type. I need someone with warmth, someone who wants a family." The words didn't just sting. They cracked something she'd spent years reinforcing. Then his chair scraped again. The sound was final. "You'll understand," he said lightly. "This dinner doesn't help either of us. Good luck, Alexandra." His footsteps retreated. Soft murmurs filled the space he left behind, tiny whispers, polite but cruel in the way only strangers' gossip could be. She stared at the empty chair across from her. The silverware on her table vibrated slightly as her hand trembled. In the background, the saxophone slipped into a somber note, long and aching, as if the music itself felt sorry for her. You should not cry here. Not in front of them. Hold it together. Just breathe. But her breath quivered. She blinked hard, and that was when she heard it. A soft, scraping, gentle rhythmic. The sound of a broom brushing across polished floor. Then, light footsteps, tiny, hurried, the kind that belonged to a child who hadn't yet learned how to walk quietly. A small voice, bright as a bell, spoke right beside her. "Excuse me. Are you okay?" Alexandra startled slightly. She turned and found a little girl no older than 5 wearing a cotton-soft pink dress and sparkly shoes that tapped lightly against the floor. The girl continued in that sincere, innocent tone children used when they meant every word with their whole heart. "Daddy says nobody should be sad alone on Christmas." Alexandra's breath caught. She opened her mouth, but no sound came out. Behind the girl, the broom stopped moving. Slow, cautious steps approached. A man's voice, warm, deep, slightly embarrassed, followed. "Lily, sweetheart, give the lady some space." "I'm sorry, miss. She has a big heart and a small filter." Something in his voice tugged at Alexandra's attention. The humility, the care, the gentleness beneath the apology. She lifted her eyes. The man wore a blue janitor uniform, sleeves, slightly rolled chest rising with a nervous breath. His boots were worn, his posture careful, as if life had taught him not to take up too much room. Yet there was a steadiness in him, something grounded. Their eyes met, and something unspoken, thin as thread, strong as fate, pulled tight between them. Lily reached for Alexandra's hand. "Don't be sad. Daddy says sad people just need someone to sit with them." Alexandra's throat constricted. Who are they? Why did this little girl walk straight into the worst moment of my year? And why? Why does the father look like he recognizes pain too well? The jazz swelled softly. The city outside buzzed faintly. And for the first time all evening, Alexandra didn't feel alone. She felt stunned, shaken, seen. As the man stepped fully into the warm restaurant light, one truth hit her like a sudden pressure drop. This janitor was not just a janitor. This was Evan Brooks, the man the world had once silenced, and she had no idea yet how deeply their lives were about to collide. For a moment, the rooftop restaurant felt as if it were holding its breath. Lily's small hand rested on Alexandra's, warm and impossibly gentle, like the world offering her a soft place to land after a long fall. Evan stood behind his daughter, one hand hovering near her shoulder, unsure whether to pull her back or let her stay. He cleared his throat. "Lily, sweetheart, we shouldn't bother the lady. She's having dinner." But Alexandra shook her head before she could stop herself. "I'm fine," she said softly. "Really, she's not bothering me." Lily brightened instantly. "Good. Because Daddy said sad people shouldn't be alone. And you look like you were trying very hard not to cry. When I try hard not to cry, my nose wiggles." Evan groaned under his breath. Lily. But Alexandra did something even she didn't expect. She laughed. Not a polite, social laugh. A real one, small, startled, a little cracked, but real. It felt like a knot in her chest loosened. The restaurant's distant chatter softened the saxophone, easing into something warmer. Alexandra dabbed the corner of her eye, steadying her breath. "You're a very observant little girl," she murmured. Lily nodded proudly. "Daddy says it's my superpower." Evan moved to scoop her up, apologizing again. "I'm so sorry. She tends to overstep. I'll get her out of your way." "No," Alexandra said before she could think. "Please, let her sit for a moment." Lily gasped. "Can I sit here?" Really, without waiting for permission? She climbed onto the empty chair opposite Alexandra, the chair her date had abandoned minutes earlier. She swung her legs under the table with the innocence of someone who believed the world was a safe place. Evan froze, torn between embarrassment and helpless affection. Alexandra looked up at him. "Join us, Evan." He blinked, startled that she knew his name. Of course she did. His name tag was stitched above his pocket. Yet the way she said it held something different, a softness that made him hesitate. "I wouldn't want to intrude," he murmured. "You're not," she said quietly. "Please." Something in her tone, a fragile honesty he couldn't ignore, made him exhale and nod. He pulled out the chair beside his daughter and sat still unsure if this was appropriate. But Lily had no such reservations. She leaned forward, eyes wide. "You look like a princess in that red dress." "Are you a princess?" Alexandra let out another soft laugh. "No. I work in aviation. What's of aviav—" Lily stumbled over the word. "Aviation," Evan supplied gently. "Planes, sweetheart. Like the ones you draw." Lily's entire face lit up. "I love planes. Do you fly them?" "No," Alexandra smiled. "I help build them." "Sort of." Lily gasped. "Do you build the wings? Or the sky pieces? Daddy says sky pieces are the best part." Evan nearly choked. "Sky pieces, Lily." But Alexandra shook her head, amused. "I like that term. Maybe we should use it in our next marketing campaign." Evan cleared his throat again, growing more embarrassed by the second. "I'm really sorry. She's spirited." "She's perfect," Alexandra said gently. And Evan felt that word land somewhere deep inside him. The waiter approached, confused but professional, offering menus. Lily asked for hot cocoa with extra marshmallows, please, while Evan insisted on paying for theirs. Alexandra raised an eyebrow. "You don't have to." Evan straightened slightly. "I know, but I want my daughter to understand we don't take advantage of people just because they have more." Their eyes held for a beat. Something about the quiet conviction in his voice, steady, humble, proud, stirred something Alexandra hadn't felt in years. Respect. Genuine respect. As they waited for their drinks, Lily filled the silence with a stream of questions that flowed like warm light through the cold parts of the evening. Do planes get lonely in the hangar? Do pilots get scared? Do clouds tickle the windows? Alexandra answered each one, surprised at how natural it felt to speak to a child, how grounding, how strangely healing. Evan watched the exchange in silence, the kind of silence that said he was taking in every detail, every shift in her expression, every laugh she didn't know she still had. When the cocoa arrived, Lily cupped it with both hands, humming happily. "This is the best Christmas ever." Evan smoothed her hair. "You say that, every Christmas bug." "Because I'm always right," she replied matter-of-factly. Alexandra found herself smiling again, longer this time, deeper. The moment stretched soft and warm, until reality nudged its way back in. Evan checked his watch. "We should let the lady enjoy her evening. It's getting late." Lily pouted. "But we didn't finish talking about sky pieces." "We'll talk on the way home," Evan promised. They stood. Alexandra felt the warmth begin to slip from her like a coat being lifted off her shoulders. "Thank you," she said quietly. She didn't specify what for. She didn't need to. Evan gave a small, respectful nod. Lily waved both arms dramatically. "Bye, Princess Lady. Don't be sad anymore." "Okay, I'll try," Alexandra whispered. They walked toward the elevator, Lily hopping Evan, guiding her with gentle patience. When they reached the exit, Alexandra caught a fragment of their conversation carried by the winter draft. "Lily, Daddy, why did she look lonely, Evan?" "Because grown-ups sometimes forget they're allowed to feel." Then came the sound that anchored itself in Alexandra's chest. The soft thud of an old car door closing. A tired engine coughing to life, rough, uneven nothing like the sleek machines she was used to hearing in her world. "We don't take from people just because they have more." "Okay," Evan said quietly, his voice drifting back toward her. "Yes," Daddy Lily replied. Alexandra stood frozen near the glass doors, one hand instinctively lifting to her heart. "Who are you?" "Evan Brooks." And why does your honesty feel like the first real thing I've heard all year?" The old engine rumbled away into the cold night, and Alexandra, for the first time in a long time, stayed standing there long after it disappeared from sight, wondering why the sound of a janitor's car felt more meaningful than anything waiting in her penthouse. The next morning, Alexandra woke long before the sun reached the edge of the skyline. Her penthouse was silent except for the low hum of the heating system, steady and predictable, a sound she normally found comforting. But today, it only reminded her of the rough cough of that old engine outside the restaurant the night before. She brewed coffee she barely tasted, answered emails she barely read, and dressed in a charcoal suit that felt like armor. By the time she stepped into the boardroom, she'd already rehearsed her composure a dozen times. The meeting about Aurora X moved like a machine built from pressure and expectation. Papers shuffled, pens tapped, executives spoke quickly, their voices clipped, efficient. "We need the marketing launch pushed forward," one board member urged. "Christmas season is ideal," another added. "We strike now or lose momentum." Alexandra nodded where appropriate, but inside something tugged at her attention, a lingering echo of Lily's questions, the way Evan's voice had dipped when he gently corrected her, the quiet strength he carried like an old bruise. When the meeting ended, Alexandra finally exhaled. She stepped out into the hallway, the click of her heels echoing against polished floors. She had planned to go straight to her office, but paused midway. Down the corridor, faint metallic clinks sounded in measured rhythm. A muffled grunt, then the scrape of a toolbox. She followed the noise. Near the service door of the luxury hotel tower, one of the flagship properties in her family's corporate empire, Evan Brooks was half-kneeling beside a ruptured water pipe. He wore the same blue janitor uniform as the night before, sleeves rolled up, revealing forearms dusted with a thin layer of grime. His brow was furrowed in concentration. But what caught her wasn't the scene, it was the precision, the way his fingers tapped lightly along the pipe, listening. The way he positioned the wrench with quiet confidence. The way he murmured under his breath, "Not the valve. It's the coupling. Just breathe. Don't rush it." He wasn't guessing. He was diagnosing. Instinct. Training. Muscle memory. Why does a janitor move like a seasoned engineer? The question pressed against her like a persistent hand. Before she could speak, a maintenance supervisor hurried over, sweating, frazzled, frustrated. "Brooks, we've been at this for an hour. What are you even doing?" "We called a contractor." "This doesn't need a contractor," Evan said calmly. "You're treating the leak but not the pressure issue. That's why it keeps bursting." "You're not the lead tech," the supervisor snapped. "No," Evan murmured, tightening the last bolt. "I'm the guy who doesn't want the entire floor to flood." A sharp hiss cut through the air. Then the pipe settled the flow, equalizing with a soft, satisfying thrum. Silence followed, clean and startled. The supervisor blinked. "How did you basic pressure math?" Evan said, simply wiping his hands. Anyone would have caught it, but Alexandra knew that wasn't true. Anyone hadn't. Only Evan had. The supervisor grumbled something about paperwork and left, leaving them alone in the hum of the service corridor. Alexandra stepped closer. "You're unusually skilled for a janitor." Evan stiffened, caught off guard. "I used to work in technical fields." "Used to," she repeated softly. He nodded, once clipped and guarded. Different lifetime. Their eyes held for a breath too long. Before she could ask more, a shout came from the upper-level VIP lounge. "Electrical issue. We need someone up here." The building's senior technician jogged by, frazzled. "Panel keeps tripping. Might be a short, or the inverter. Can't tell." Alexandra and Evan exchanged a quick glance. Then Evan sighed, grabbed his toolkit and followed. She followed too, though she wouldn't have admitted it. Upstairs, the air buzzed with anxious energy. Guests complained. Staff apologized in hushed tones. The technician poked at the panel, muttering under his breath. "It's not reading right. Maybe wiring. Maybe overload." "Step aside," Evan said gently. The technician bristled. "I've got it." "No, you don't." Evan replied, not arrogant, just honest. "Listen." He pressed 2 fingers against the panel casing, waited, then nodded. "Hear that?" The pulsing hum. "That's resonance from a balancing capacitor. It's overheating." The technician paused. "I didn't hear anything. You weren't listening for the right thing." Evan reached into the panel, carefully, hands steady, movements fluent. Within seconds, the humming stabilized. The lights flickered back to full strength. A small wave of applause rose from relieved guests. Alexandra didn't join them. She was too busy staring at the man who'd just fixed the problem with the ease of someone who had once built systems far more complex than hotel wiring. Her voice was quiet when she approached him after the crowd dispersed. "Where did you learn to do that?" A long silence. Evan swallowed. "I told you," he said softly. "Different lifetime." And it was the soft pain in those words, not the words themselves, that unsettled her most. Later that evening, while reviewing property reports, Alexandra found herself drifting toward the employee break room. She told herself it was coincidence that she was only inspecting operations, but deep down, she knew better. Inside the small room, a child's laughter rang like tiny bells. Lily sat cross-legged on the floor, surrounded by crayon drawings of airplanes, messy, colorful, wild with imagination. Evan sat beside her, fixing a broken toy plane while pretending not to notice her artistic chaos. When Lily saw Alexandra, she lit up instantly. Princess Lady Evan nearly dropped the toy. Lily manners. But Alexandra knelt beside her, mesmerized by the drawings. One in particular drew her attention, a sketch of an aircraft with fuel lines winding through its body in a way that felt oddly familiar. "Where did you see this?" Alexandra asked gently. "Daddy's old papers," Lily chirped. "He says they're grown-up drawings, but I like them. I draw them better." Evan stiffened. "Lily," he whispered, we don't talk about those." But Alexandra wasn't listening anymore. Her heart was pounding, because she recognized the structure. She'd seen it in a confidential Aurora X engineering document. Her voice barely rose above a whisper. "You used to design fuel systems." Evan looked away. "I don't do that anymore." "But you did," she pressed gently. "And you were good at it." He exhaled sharply, running a hand over his face. "Alexandra, please, just leave the past where it is." But she couldn't, because somehow this man, this father, this janitor with engineer hands was connected to something far larger than he wanted to admit. That night, in the solitude of her home office, Alexandra opened her laptop. She searched through old internal archives, her fingers trembling. A file appeared in the list, Brooks Fuel Memo. Confidential. She clicked. A knock at the door startled her. "Miss Vale, the board, is waiting." Her screen flickered as it timed out, snapping shut the window before she could read a word. But not before one thing flashed across the display. "Confidential. Do not reopen." Her heart hammered. What were they hiding? The building was quiet. Long after midnight, too quiet for a corporate tower that usually hummed with late-night analysts and security staff making their rounds. But tonight, even the air felt cautious, as if it understood that Alexandra was doing something she shouldn't. The soft whoosh of the elevator doors closing behind her echoed down the executive hallway. Every step she took toward her office sounded sharper than usual, heels tapping like small declarations of defiance. When she entered her office, she didn't turn on the lights. She didn't want brightness. She needed shadows, needed the cover they provided. The only sound was the gentle hum of the HVAC system and the occasional distant chime of the service elevator. She sat at her desk, opened her laptop, and typed a code known only to a handful of executives over the last 20 years. A hidden access panel appeared on the screen, asking for a second authentication. Her hand hesitated. "If I open this, I can't pretend I didn't know." Her father's face flickered in her memory, his hand waving at her childhood self as he walked through a hangar aircraft engines cooling behind him. Safety is the only thing we never negotiate, Alex. Everything else is business. Her throat tightened as she entered the second passcode. The hidden archive opened with a soft chime. She typed a name she already knew the system would resist Brooks. Dozens of files surfaced, some encrypted, some marked sealed, some flagged with red tags that said things like executive review only and legal exception required. Her cursor hovered, then clicked on the one she'd seen earlier. Brooks Fuel Memo. Confidential. The file loaded, slowly accompanied by a low digital whir. A scanned report appeared, written in clear technical language but simplified enough for board members to grasp. She scrolled through rows of diagrams, fuel distribution pathways, pressure tolerances, redundancy maps. Even with her limited engineering background, she recognized the patterns. The same patterns she'd seen in Lily's drawing, the same patterns she'd seen in Aurora X design briefs. A chill wrapped itself around her spine. She kept scrolling. Highlighted sections revealed internal notes, warnings Evan had once written to his supervisors. He had flagged a design flaw that could, under long-range travel and certain atmospheric conditions, trigger a fuel imbalance. Her breath slowed. Her back stiffened. Her pulse thudded in her ears. He had been right. Every word. Her stomach twisted as she opened the next file board, hearing Brooks' investigation, audio logs. She pressed play. Muffled voices filled her office, shifting papers, chairs scraping on carpet, the rustle of tension filling a room. A male voice spoke first. Mr. Brooks, your memo has caused unnecessary alarm across multiple departments. Evan's voice followed. Younger, steadier, measured. With respect, the design flaw is real. If unaddressed, the aircraft may experience. We've already reviewed your claims, another voice interrupted, and engineering leadership disagrees. A pause. A breath. Then a voice she knew too well, one that lived in her memory as both comfort and authority. Her father. Mr. Brooks, Richard Vale said your dedication is commendable, but alarming the industry without concrete evidence puts livelihoods at risk. We cannot allow speculative design concerns to jeopardize public trust. I'm not trying to alarm anyone, Evan insisted. His voice trembled, not with fear, but conviction. I'm trying to prevent an accident. Another executive cut in sharply. We're concluding this hearing. Thank you, Mr. Brooks. The recording clicked off. Alexandra's hand covered her mouth. Her father, the man she idolized, the founder of the Vale aviation legacy, had been part of the decision that silenced Evan. Not out of cruelty, not out of malice, but out of fear. Fear of panic, fear of scandal, fear of losing everything he'd built. But in choosing that fear, he'd destroyed a man's career, a man who had been right. A soft ding broke her trance. Another file had finished loading board meeting summary, Brooks' case vote. She skimmed until she saw it. Richard Vale vote in favor of termination notes. Stability of market precedents over internal speculation. Recommendation to avoid public discussion. Her chest tightened, squeezing her breath. Her eyes blurred as she read it again, tears stinging at the edges of her vision. Dad. What did you do? She leaned back in her chair, fingers trembling against the armrests. The office felt colder, the shadows heavier. A notification pinged at the corner of her screen, a new email. From CFO Martin Hale, subject, a friendly reminder. She opened it. Alexandra, legal counsel advises against revisiting old cases, including the Brooks matter. Pursuing this line of inquiry may raise questions we are not prepared to answer. Strongly recommend focusing on Aurora X launch initiatives. MH, she reread the message slowly. Strongly recommend. Not a suggestion. A warning. Alexandra's jaw tightened. For years, she had fought to prove she was more than a legacy, more than her father's shadow. She had believed that keeping the company strong was how she honored him. But this wasn't strength. This was avoidance. This was a stain hidden under decades of polished branding. Her cursor hovered over the archive window again. Her father's signature glowed on the screen, sharp against the digital paper. If he protected the company by sacrificing one man. What am I willing to sacrifice to protect the truth? Her thoughts spun in circles. Voices from the past. Voices from tonight. Lily's innocent giggle. Evan's tired kindness. Her father's old mantra. Safety is the thing we never negotiate. But he had negotiated it, and the company was doing it again. Her chest shook. She closed her eyes and everything felt unsteady, like standing on a high runway with crosswinds threatening to shove her sideways. A few tears slipped down before she could stop them. She whispered to the empty room voice, cracking, "Dad. What am I supposed to do now?" No answer came, only the cold hum of the office vent. Outside the tall windows, the city glowed unaware. Inside, Alexandra Vale pressed her palms to her eyes, fighting the truth she had just uncovered. She couldn't unsee it. She couldn't unknow it. And if she dared to follow the truth all the way down, she knew exactly where it would lead. To Evan Brooks, to the past, to a decision that could destroy or redeem everything her family had ever built. The Riverfront Cafe was quiet in the early afternoon, its windows fogged slightly from the warmth inside. The steady hum of the espresso machine blended with the soft clatter of ceramic cups. Outside, the winter wind tugged at passing scarves and coats, but inside, everything felt gentler, like a world momentarily paused. Alexandra chose a small corner table far from the door where she could hear the faint creak of wooden chairs and the soft whir of ceiling fans. She needed calm. She needed space. And more than anything, she needed to understand the man she was about to meet. Evan arrived exactly on time. His boots tracked the faint crunch of snow as he stepped through the door, shaking off the cold. Lily bounced beside him, her coat zipper jingling with each hop. She spotted Alexandra first. "Princess Lady!" she cried, rushing forward. Alexandra couldn't help smiling as the little girl flung herself into the booth beside her. Evan followed more cautiously, carrying a small stack of papers under his arm. "I hope we're not late," he said, voice warm but tired. "Right on time," Alexandra replied. "Thank you both for coming." "We brought drawings," Lily announced proudly, pulling a thick bundle of crayon sketches from her backpack. "Daddy said you like planes, so I brought my airplane collection." Evan rubbed his forehead. She insisted he muttered, said it was professional courtesy. Lily spread the drawings across the table like tarot cards predicting futures. No one expected a forest of childlike airplanes with bright wings, looping arrows, smiling clouds, and exaggerated fuel lines that twisted like vines. Alexandra felt her breath hitch. Because there in one of Lily's drawings was a layout, she recognized one she should not have recognized. The same fuel routing structure displayed during the Aurora X briefing. The same pattern she'd seen in the Brooks memo. "I've seen this before," she whispered. Evan stilled. Lily just likes copying shapes she sees around the house. It's nothing technical. But Alexandra's pulse throbbed in her ears. These lines here, this distribution path, it's almost identical to Alexandra. Evan's voice turned firm. Gentle, but firm. "Please." She looked at him and saw something raw flicker behind his eyes. A warning, a plea, but she couldn't unsee it. "These aren't ordinary drawings," she said softly. "They're model schematics." Evan exhaled through his nose, the kind of exhale that carried years of exhaustion and grief. He stared at Lily's picture jaw tightening. "It's just old paperwork," he murmured. "Stuff I should have thrown away." Alexandra leaned forward. "But you didn't." Before he could respond, Lily tugged at his sleeve. "Daddy, can I have marshmallows?" He nodded. "Go ask the barista. 1 cup only." As Lily skipped away, the faint jingle of her boots fading, the air grew heavier between the two adults. Alexandra lowered her voice. Evan, I know you used to be more than a janitor. He stared at the tabletop. That's not who I am anymore. And yet she gestured at the drawing. Your daughter knows fuel pathways most engineers can't memorize. He swallowed hard. Kids pick up things. She likes shapes. That's all. Evan Alexandra whispered I saw the memo. His head snapped up. You. His voice broke slightly. You opened it. I had to. Alexandra's fingers trembled around her cup. Because I saw something yesterday that terrified me. She told him quietly, carefully about the recent technical briefings, the pressure from the board, and the troubling resemblance between the Aurora X diagrams and the old fuel model from his case file. Evan listened without interrupting, but his shoulders coiled tighter and tighter as if bracing against a blow. When she finished, the silence stretched. Finally he spoke, voice low, almost hoarse. Alexandra, I can't do this again. You don't have to, she replied gently. Just help me understand. Understand what he shot back, bitterness cutting through. That speaking up cost me my career, that my wife got sick while we were drowning in legal fees, that Lily's first memory of me is from a hospital waiting room because I couldn't afford proper home care. He shook his head. No, I won't reopen that door. The pain in his voice cracked her wide open. She knew he wasn't angry at her. He was angry at the world that had broken him. She tried again, softer. I'm not here to put you at risk, or drag you back into something you left behind. Evan looked toward Lily, who was stirring a mountain of marshmallows into her cocoa, humming to herself, and his expression softened. My daughter needs stability, he whispered, not a father haunted by the past. Alexandra followed his gaze, her heart twisting. If this was about Lily's flight, not a stranger's, would you stay quiet? The question rose up inside her, but she wasn't ready to ask it, not yet. Instead, she tested a different path. What if the past isn't done with you? What if the system you warned about wasn't fixed? Evan's jaw clenched. They would never reuse that design. Not after what happened. She hesitated. Evan. They did. His eyes widened just a fraction, but it was enough. The crack in his calm. The moment he faltered. He didn't speak. He didn't have to. Because in that moment, Alexandra understood he already suspected it. Maybe he'd suspected it for years and shoved the thought away every time it resurfaced. For Lily's sake. For his sanity. Lily returned then, climbing into her seat with a happy sigh, cocoa sloshing dangerously near the rim. Daddy, look extra marshmallows, Evan forced a smile. That's wonderful, Bug. The tension between the adults dissolved just enough for the child's joy to fill in the cracks. Alexandra watched father and daughter, her heart bruising at the tenderness between them. She had grown up with private tutors, nannies, and a father who loved her deeply, but whose affection was often buried beneath the weight of responsibility. Seeing Evan kneel to clean a stray marshmallow spill from Lily's sleeve, hearing the soft apology in his voice for using a napkin that was too cold, it stirred something inside her she didn't know she'd been missing. She waited until Lily was distracted again before lowering her voice. Evan. Something is very wrong with Aurora X, and I think it's connected to what happened to you. I need to know what you know. He closed his eyes briefly as if searching for strength. When he opened them again, she saw terror and truth. But before he could speak, her phone buzzed. A meeting reminder. The board was waiting, and she was about to walk into a room full of people who would do anything to keep the past buried. She rose slowly. Thank you for meeting me, and for trusting me enough to listen. Evan nodded, though trust wasn't quite the right word. Fear, caution, hope, all tangled. As she reached the door, he said quietly, Be careful, Alexandra. They don't like people asking the wrong questions. She paused. So did he. Their eyes met, and in the quiet of that riverfront cafe, she finally asked the question that would change everything. Evan. If someone knew something dangerous was happening and they stayed silent, would that be lying? He looked at Lily, then back at her. His voice cracked as he answered, yes. The news spread quietly at first through whispered chatter in engineering lounges, hurried steps in simulation rooms, and the sharp clatter of keyboards as analysts exchanged glances they didn't dare voice aloud. By midday, everyone at Vale Aerospace had heard some version of it. Aurora X's test flight had returned early. A fuel imbalance warning triggered mid-air. Pilots reported unexpected lateral drift. No injuries. No damage. Official explanation pending. To the public, it would sound like a routine technical hiccup, but to those who knew how planes behaved, to those who listened for the subtle noises that spelled danger, it was a siren. Alexandra heard the news through her headset as she walked through the glass corridor connecting the executive wing to the research labs. A project manager's voice buzzed in her ear. CEO Vale, the test didn't fail, but it wasn't clean either. Engineering is requesting additional simulations. Send me the raw logs, she said. There was a pause on the line. Nervous, hesitant. Ma'am, should we send them to board review too? No, she replied sharply. Not yet. When she ended the call, the silence of the hallway pressed in around her. She could hear only the quiet tap of her heels and the distant drone of ventilation sounds that now carried a strange weight like an approaching storm she couldn't see but could smell in the air. The emergency meeting with senior engineers felt more like a courtroom than a conference room. A lead technician cleared his throat, flipping through data. We believe it was a sensor error. Nothing more. Another nodded. The fuel system itself is stable. And even if there were a minor variance, the software can adjust. A younger engineer spoke up. We could patch this in the next build. Patch. The word made Alexandra's stomach sink. She pressed her fingertips together. Is anyone considering that the imbalance warning wasn't a false alarm? Silence rippled across the room. Finally, someone said, "With respect, ma'am. No structural issues were found in the Brooks investigation years ago. It was closed." The name hit her like a stone dropped into water, sending waves through her chest. Brooks. She dismissed the team politely but firmly. When the door closed behind them, she felt the weight of something enormous tightening around her. Not just corporate responsibility, not just family legacy. A life or death question. That evening, she drove to Evan's small apartment. The heater in her car hummed the wipers, whispering across the windshield, clearing light snow. At every stoplight, she gripped the steering wheel a little harder. I'm driving toward the truth, she thought. A truth my father buried. A truth that could ruin me. When she arrived, the building was quiet. A soft glow seeped from Evan's living room window. Inside, the TV played an old cartoon at low volume, washing the room in tiny bursts of color. Lily was asleep on the sofa, breathing softly, her tiny snores like whispers of innocence. Evan knelt beside her, tucking a blanket around her shoulders. When he saw Alexandra standing in the doorway, he straightened as if bracing himself. "What happened?" he asked quietly. She offered him a folder, the raw data logs from the Aurora X flight. He set it on the kitchen table. The old wood creaked when he pulled out a chair. Alexandra sat across from him, the hum of the refrigerator the only sound in the cramped kitchen. Evan began reading. His face changed slowly, first confusion, then recognition, then a haunted stillness. Minutes passed. He flipped a page, then another. Then he closed the file completely. When he finally spoke, his voice was low, steady, and utterly devastating. This is the same pattern. Alexandra swallowed. The same as what I warned them about. His fingers pressed into the table. High-altitude endurance flights, extended crosswinds, long lateral load. The imbalance is the first warning. If they keep flying this, it's not a matter of if something goes wrong. It's when. Her chest tightened. They reused the design. No, Evan whispered. They didn't even bother to fix it. Silence settled thick and heavy. He rubbed his eyes with the heel of his palm. "I can't do this again, Alexandra. I can't. Last time they turned me into the problem. They dragged my name through the mud. My wife." His breath faltered. "She was so sick. We lost our home. I lost my job. Lily was still in diapers. I can't put her through that again." His pain cracked open in front of her like a fault line. Alexandra's voice softened. "I don't want to drag you into anything. I just needed to know whether I was imagining it." "You're not," he said. "You're right, and you're in danger of losing everything if you push this." "I'm already losing sleep," she murmured, her eyes drifting to the living room where Lily slept peacefully. "Doesn't that count for something?" Evan didn't answer. She leaned forward. "Evan, what would you do if Lily were boarding an Aurora X flight next month?" The question struck him like a blow. He froze. Completely. Then his expression broke, because despite all his fear, he already knew the answer. He stood up abruptly and walked into the living room, running a hand over his daughter's hair. His voice was barely audible. "I can't stay quiet twice," he whispered. When he turned back to Alexandra, something in him had shifted. Fear was still there, but layered with anger and purpose. He nodded once sharply. "If we do this, we do it all the way. And if we don't," she asked, "then someone dies." The truth hung in the air like smoke. Alexandra felt her heart pound like a warning drum. She stepped back into the cold night minutes later, her breath fogging in the air, the weight of what they'd just agreed to settling over her shoulders like a too heavy coat. She sat in her car, gripping the steering wheel until her knuckles whitened. The radio flicked on automatically a news report about the upcoming Aurora X unveiling, set to launch in 30 days. She shut the radio off, but in her mind she still heard the cockpit alarm from 7 years ago. The ghost of a warning, the echo of a truth buried too long. She drove home in silence, and when she stepped into her penthouse, the first thing she saw was her father's framed photograph standing tall, smiling, confident. Her voice broke as she whispered to him, "If I expose this, am I betraying you?" No answer, only the hum of the quiet, lonely room. By dawn, Alexandra had barely slept. The city outside her penthouse was just beginning to stir, early buses sighing along the boulevard, a delivery truck backing into an alley, the faint hum of a street sweeper brushing cold pavement. Ordinary sounds of a waking world, but to her they sounded strangely ominous, like distant warnings she couldn't ignore. She arrived at headquarters early, her heels whispering across polished marble as she moved toward the boardroom. The silence of the pre-dawn building felt heavier than usual, as though the walls themselves were bracing. Her assistant intercepted her near the conference entrance, voice low. "Ma'am, they've already gathered. They asked to speak to you before the morning briefing." Of course they had. Inside, the boardroom was packed. CFO Martin Hale, legal counsel, Porter Briggs, the heads of engineering and marketing, and 3 board members who almost never arrived early unless something had gone very wrong. The air smelled faintly of burnt coffee and stale tension. Martin Hale stood first. "Alexandra, we need to address a developing issue." She knew that tone. Calm. Practiced. The voice of someone preparing to corner her gently. "What issue?" He slid a folder toward her. "Internal reports indicate you requested raw data logs from the Aurora X test flight, without looping in the board." Alexandra kept her face neutral. "It's my right to review them." Martin's voice remained polite but firmer. "It's also protocol to notify the Oversight Committee, especially given the sensitivity." "Fuel imbalance warnings aren't a small matter," she replied. A board member leaned forward, fingers drumming softly. "We've received notice that you've been asking questions about a closed case, the Brooks case." Her pulse flickered. Martin added, "This concerns us. That investigation concluded years ago. Revisiting it could create unnecessary noise." Noise. That was the word people used when they didn't want truth getting too loud. Legal counsel Porter Briggs adjusted his glasses. Digging into Brooks could expose us to legal risk reopen liability and call the late Richard Vale's judgment into question. That is not in the best interest of the company or of you. Her father's name hit her like cold water. She inhaled slowly. If there is a systemic safety issue. There is no systemic issue, Porter said sharply. Engineering signed off. The FAA signed off. You know this. Alexandra looked at each of them. Their expressions were polite, concerned, but beneath the veneer she sensed something sharper fear wrapped in professionalism. Martin softened his tone. Alexandra, listen. We all admired your father. His legacy is the backbone of this company, but you're letting emotions cloud business judgment. Grounding Aurora X now would sink our year-end projections, infuriate investors, and jeopardize thousands of jobs. A second board member added, We aren't saying ignore the test flight anomaly. Just control the narrative. Call it a sensor issue. Issue a patch. Move on. Move on. The phrase tasted bitter. Her voice came out steady but quiet. What if the anomaly wasn't a sensor error? What if it's something in the design? Engineering Director Mills bristled. You're not an engineer. No, she said softly. But I'm the CEO who is responsible if I look away and a plane goes down. A heavy silence dropped across the room. Porter leaned forward. If you ground Aurora X without the board's approval, you'll trigger a vote, an immediate vote on your position as CEO. The chill that ran through her wasn't fear, it was clarity. This was a warning. A polite one, a sharp one. She steadied her breath. I appreciate the candidness, but safety is not negotiable. Martin sighed. Alexandra. You sound like your father when he was cornered by regulators years ago. He understood the weight of perception. Right now, the perception is that you're letting sentimentality drive decisions. Sentimentality. If only they knew the truth behind her sleepless nights. She left the boardroom feeling faintly dizzy, as though the hallway lights were flickering not physically but in her chest. She headed toward her office, but her phone buzzed in her hand. A message from Evan. Lily's running a fever. I'm taking her to the clinic. Might miss tonight's shift. She paused mid-step. In the background of the audio message he sent next, she heard Lily's tired breathing, the crinkling sound of a small coat, and Evan soothing her with soft words. It stirred something deep in her, something that reminded her why this fight mattered beyond revenue projections and board votes. She texted back, Keep me updated. Need anything? His reply came a few minutes later, just hoping it's nothing serious. A second message followed hesitant. She asked me something you should hear. He sent a recording. Lily's small voice drifted through Daddy. If something is dangerous and grown-ups pretend it's not, does that make airplanes sad? Because airplanes should always feel safe. Alexandra pressed a hand to her chest. The question wasn't technical. It wasn't political. It was pure. 5-year-old clarity. Her father had once told her that engineering wasn't just about machines. It was about the people who trusted those machines with their lives. Had he forgotten that? Had she? She closed her eyes. Later that night, after hours of futile attempts to concentrate through endless messages from nervous executives, Alexandra slipped out of the building and walked to her car. Snow had begun to fall, soft flakes landing on her coat, melting instantly against her breath. She sat behind the wheel, the faint tapping of snow against the windshield like quiet knocks from the universe urging her to choose a path. Stay quiet and protect the company. Speak up and risk losing it all. Her phone buzzed again. A final update from Evan Clinic says it's just a cold. She's okay. Then another message added after a long pause. She asked if airplanes can get hurt because grown-ups lie. I didn't know what to tell her, Alexandra typed back with trembling fingers. Tell her the truth matters, even when it's hard. She stared at the message before hitting send. because she knew the next step would require every ounce of courage she had left. There was no turning back now. Tomorrow, the board would push harder. Tomorrow, pressure would intensify. Tomorrow, she would have to choose between legacy and conscience. But tonight, in the solitude of her car, she whispered a promise into the cold air. I won't let them bury the truth again. The hallway outside Evan's apartment was quiet, the kind of stillness that settles over older buildings at night, soft hum of a distant radiator, muted footsteps from a neighbor upstairs, the faint buzz of a fluorescent bulb that needed replacing. Alexandra paused outside his door, exhaling into the dimly lit corridor. Her breath fogged slightly in the cool air. She knocked gently. A moment later, the lock clicked once, then again. Evan opened the door slowly, as if bracing for bad news. His eyes were tired but alert red at the edges from too many sleepless nights, too many memories that refused to fade. Alexandra, he said quietly. Come in. Inside, the apartment was warm with the familiar domestic sounds she'd begun to associate with him, soft, clattering dishes drying on a rack, the hush of a TV cartoon paused mid-song, the faint rustle of a blanket where Lily slept curled up on the couch. Her small breaths rose and fell in steady rhythm. Alexandra's voice softened. How is she better? He whispered. Still a little warm, but the doctor said it's nothing serious. Relief swept through her chest. She glanced at Lily, her hair sticking out in funny directions, her hand resting on a paper airplane she must have fallen asleep holding. Something in that simplicity pulled at Alexandra's heart. Evan motioned toward the small kitchen table. Sit. They settled across from each other, a dim lamp casting soft pools of light onto worn wood. For a moment, neither spoke. The silence felt thick, like both were searching for the right beginning. She finally broke it. I need to tell you everything, she said. Evan's expression tightened like he knew the conversation he'd been avoiding had finally caught him. Alexandra took a breath, steadying her voice. I know what the board did to you. I found the files. I listened to the hearing. I know my father voted to remove you. His jaw clenched, though he didn't look surprised. I figured as much. I didn't know, she whispered. I truly didn't. And I'm so sorry for what happened. He looked down at the table, tracing a faint scratch with his thumb. Sorry won't give me those years back, he said quietly. Won't give Lily the mother she lost. Won't undo what they did. I know, she breathed the words, trembling. But I'm not here to ask for forgiveness. I'm here because I need to understand. He finally looked up, the weight of years reflected in his eyes. Understand what? Why you stayed silent after she said? Why you didn't fight back? Evan leaned back in his chair. His voice dropped to a whisper that carried an ache too old to hide. When they came after me, I thought I could handle it. I thought telling the truth was enough. But they dragged my name through every paper. Said I was unstable. Said I fabricated data. And while they were doing that, his voice broke slightly. My wife was fighting cancer. We were drowning in medical bills. And I realized something. What she asked gently. That I couldn't save airplanes and save her at the same time. The quiet words hit her chest like a punch. I had to choose my family, he continued. But I still lost her. And I barely held on to Lily. So when you ask why I didn't fight, he swallowed hard. It's because fighting cost me everything once. Alexandra's throat tightened. She wanted to reach across the table, but fear of breaking whatever fragile trust existed between them kept her hand still. I'm not asking you to fight again, she said softly. I'm asking what you think is right, because I can't do this alone. He rubbed his face with both hands, shaking his head slowly. Alexandra, this isn't just a company scandal. If you ground Aurora X, the board will remove you. Investors will scream. Regulators will swarm. Your father's legacy. His voice dropped. Will crumble. Yes, she whispered. But if I don't and something happens, if one plane goes down because we looked away, How many lives is my father's reputation worth? How many families? The question hung in the air like an exposed wire, dangerous, sparking truth. Evan stared at her for a long moment as if seeing her differently. "You really are different from them," he murmured. But she didn't feel different. She felt terrified. "I keep hearing Lily's voice," Alexandra admitted. "Her question about whether airplanes get sad when grown-ups lie. It won't leave me." Evan inhaled sharply, emotion flickering across his face. "She's 5. She sees things in simple ways." "Simple doesn't mean wrong," Alexandra said. "Sometimes kids say what adults are too scared to." He didn't respond immediately. Instead, his eyes drifted toward the living room where Lily shifted slightly in her sleep, mumbling something unintelligible as she snuggled deeper into the blanket. "My daughter," he whispered, "deserves a world where the truth matters." "She does," Alexandra said, "and so do the people who trust the planes we build." Another stretch of silence filled the room, soft, heavy trembling. Then Evan whispered the question he'd been avoiding for years. "Alexandra, if we do this, what happens to May? My mother depends on me. Lily depends on me. If they tear me apart again, I don't know if I can come back from it." Her heart clenched. "I won't let them tear you apart. Not again. If we tell the truth, we do it together." He looked at her. Really, looked at her as if searching for cracks for hesitation for anything that suggested she might falter. But she didn't. "Alexandra," he said slowly, "this will break things." "Yes," she replied, "but maybe they need to break." He pressed his palms flat on the table, breathing deeply as if wrestling a storm inside his chest. Then a soft sound. A small voice. Lily, half asleep, stood in the doorway, rubbing her eyes with tiny fists. "Daddy," she whispered, "are you telling the truth?" "Even when it's scary." Evan froze. Alexandra froze. The little girl blinked up at him, waiting. Evan dropped to his knees, pulling her gently into his arms. His voice broke against her hair. "I'm trying, Bug," he whispered. "I'm trying." She leaned back slightly, placing her small hand on his cheek. "You tell me the truth," she said, "even when it makes me cry. So, you should tell it too." Alexandra felt tears prick her eyes. Evan closed his exhaling shakily, and when he opened them again, something had changed. Something braver, something resolute, something that had been waiting years to come alive. He reached for his phone with trembling fingers. "Alexandra," he said softly, "if we do this, we do it all the way." She nodded, barely breathing. "No turning back," he added. Her heart pounded. "Then let's begin." A faint chime sounded as he sent a message, a single note echoing through the small apartment. A decision made. A path chosen. A truth awakened. The conference room they chose wasn't on any official floor plan. It was a forgotten space 2 levels below the main engineering wing, once used for supplier briefings, now mostly a dumping ground for old chairs and outdated projector screens. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead with a faint, uneven buzz, and somewhere in the ventilation system, a loose panel clicked every few seconds. It sounded like a nervous heartbeat. Alexandra sat at the end of the table jacket, off sleeves rolled up. Across from her 3 independent engineers studied printed pages and glowing laptop screens. Evan sat slightly apart near the wall as if ready to bolt if someone opened the wrong door. The only constant sound was the rustle of paper and the low whir of a laptop fan. "Walk me through it again," Alexandra said quietly. The lead independent engineer, a woman in her 50s with a calm voice and the no-nonsense air of someone who'd seen too much, tapped her pen against a highlighted section. "The test flight logs match the behavior modeled in this earlier analysis," she said. "Fuel distribution destabilizes under prolonged lateral load. The system compensates until it doesn't." A second engineer added, "Your current software mitigations are cosmetic. They delay the issue. They don't eliminate it. Under certain conditions, the third concluded, Aurora X is vulnerable. You get the wrong combination of weatherweight and route, and you could have a serious incident. The word incident felt too small. Evan's hands were clasped so tightly his knuckles had gone white. He stayed silent, eyes on the graphs that looked like ghosts of the ones he'd made 7 years ago. The lead engineer glanced toward him. Mr. Brooks, your original model was accurate, painfully accurate. The sound of that acknowledgement, calm matter of fact, seemed to hit him harder than any accusation ever had. He gave a single small nod. I wish it hadn't been. Alexandra exhaled slowly. So it's confirmed, she said. We have a systemic risk. Yes, the woman replied. If you ground Aurora X now and address this fully, you'll be hammered in the press. Investors will howl, but you'll likely prevent something much worse. And if I don't? Alexandra asked, already knowing the answer. The engineer didn't soften it. You're gambling with lives. And one day the truth will catch up. It always does. The room went quiet again. A faint rumble of an HVAC unit kicked on overhead. Evan's chair creaked when he shifted his weight. Somewhere down the hall a door shut with a hollow thud. Alexandra straightened. All right, she said. Then we ground it. All of it. Not just the test aircraft, the entire Aurora X program. One of the engineers sucked in a breath. That's going to be unprecedented. Good, Alexandra replied. Maybe it's time we did something unprecedented for the right reasons. She outlined her plan aloud, building it with her voice as if she were laying track while the train was already moving. Step 1. Temporary grounding of all Aurora X aircraft and suspension of further test flights. Step 2. Full public cooperation with regulators. We disclose the technical issue, not every internal detail, but enough for them to truly understand the risk. Step 3. We announce a new safety initiative. Whistleblower protection. Independent review of critical systems. Not as spin, but as policy. Evan listened, stunned. You'd put that in writing, he asked. Whistleblower protection. Yes, she said, and we give it teeth. He stared at her for a long beat. You know the board will go to war over this. I know, she said. But if they want that war, they'll have to fight it in the open. The independent engineers exchanged glances, part admiration, part worry. Ms. Vale, the lead one, said softly, This will cost you. I'm not the one who's paid the highest price, Alexandra replied, glancing toward Evan. I'm just late to the truth. The backlash came faster than she expected. Within hours of circulating an internal draft of her plan, her phone lit up with calls from board members, lawyers, and investors. Her assistant's voice over the intercom sounded strained. Ma'am, Martin Hale and Porter Briggs are here. They say it's urgent. Of course it was. In the boardroom, the tension was physical sharp intakes of breath, the scrape of chair legs, the soft crack of someone's knuckles under the table. Martin's voice was icy this time. Grounding Aurora X is an overreaction. We have procedures. We have internal risk frameworks. This is not how we handle anomalies. Porter slid a document across the table with a soft whisper of paper. We've drawn up an alternate statement. Acknowledge the test flight anomaly. Attribute it to software calibration. Commit to a patch. No mention of systemic design flaws. No mention of past cases. Past cases. They meant Evan. Alexandra stared at the document but didn't touch it. This won't fix the problem, she said softly. Porter's tone hardened. It fixes the liability for now. Martin added, We have to think about shareholders, employees, your father's legacy. Don't she cut in sharper than she intended. Do not use my father as a shield for hiding the truth. Silence hit the room like a dropped weight. A board member at the far end cleared his throat. If you proceed with this grounding plan, we will have no choice but to call for a vote of no confidence. It's not personal. It's governance. Not personal. As if tearing down a daughter for refusing to repeat her father's mistake could ever be anything but personal. Alexandra's voice was steady when she answered. "Call your vote," she said. "But understand this, whether I'm in that chair or not, the logs exist. The models exist. And the risk is real. If you choose to pretend otherwise, that decision will have your names on it." They didn't like that. She saw it in the way eyes narrowed in the faint, angry breath from one corner and the muted rustle of someone shifting in their seat as if the floor had become unsteady. But she didn't back down. Evan, meanwhile, received his own kind of pressure. He found the envelope wedged under his apartment door when he came home from a grocery run with Lily. The paper scraped softly against the worn flooring as he picked it up. The letterhead carried the name of his former employer and their legal department. Lily played on the living room rug with her toy planes making soft whooshing noises unaware as he read. The letter was cold, clinical, precise. They reminded him of his prior non-disclosure agreements. They cited clauses about defamation and unauthorized disclosure of proprietary information. They warned that if he continued to make or support claims about past design issues, they would pursue all available legal remedies. The sound of the page shaking in his hands was soft, but inside him, old fear roared to life. He took a slow breath. Lily looked up at him. "Daddy, is it bad mail or good mail?" He forced his voice to be light. Just boring, grown-up mail bug. But when he texted Alexandra a photo of the letter, his message was stripped of pretense. "They're coming after me again." Her response came quickly. "They're trying to scare you quiet. You're not alone this time." He stared at her words, then at his daughter on the floor, then at the letter in his hand. His heart hammered out a rhythm he recognized from 7 years ago, the rhythm of someone standing at a crossroads with no safe path. That night, Alexandra didn't go home right away. Instead, she drove to a quiet, windswept cemetery on a hill just outside the city. The air there was different, thinner, sharper, filled with dry winter grass whispering against stone markers. She walked the familiar path to her father's grave. The crunch of gravel under her heels sounded too loud in the stillness. When she reached the headstone, she stood for a long moment, listening to the wind slip past, to the distant rumble of a highway, to the faint clink of flagpoles tapping against their metal stands. "Hi, Dad," she whispered. The stone said nothing back. She knelt, the cold seeping through her coat. Her fingers traced his name. "Do you know what they're asking me to do?" she murmured. "They want me to say it's nothing. They want me to smooth it over the way you did." Her voice shook, and I keep wondering, were you proud of that decision, or did it haunt you? A gust of wind answered rattling dried leaves nearby. "I found the memo," she confessed. "I heard the recording. I know what you said to Evan Brooks. I know you voted to silence him, to protect this company, to protect me." Her throat burned as tears slid down her cheeks. "But if I do the same thing now, who am I protecting, you or a lie about you?" She bowed her head, shoulders trembling. "I don't know how to honor you and fix this at the same time," she whispered. "If I tell the truth, I might destroy your legacy. If I stay quiet, I'll destroy myself." The only reply was the lonely rush of winter wind crossing stone. She stayed there, kneeling in front of his name, the weight of the decision pressing down so hard she could barely breathe. And somewhere inside that silence, she realized something terrifying. There was no path forward that didn't break something. The only question left was what or who she was willing to break. The night deepened around her, and the choice she had been postponing could no longer wait. The lobby of Vail Aerospace's global headquarters felt different that morning. Not louder, not busier, just charged. Cameras were already being set up in the press area. Microphones clacked against each other as sound crews tested them. Reporters murmured into phones, their whispers sharp with anticipation. Somewhere near the entryway, a child cried briefly, then quieted when a parent hushed them. Everything smelled faintly of cold air brought in by hundreds of coats mixed with the sterile scent of glass and steel. Alexandra stepped out of the executive elevator into that atmosphere, her heels soft against the marble floor. Every eye turned to her. not because she was a CEO, but because they sensed something was about to break open. She walked through the growing crowd with a deliberate calm she didn't feel. Air hiccuped around her as flashes went off camera shutters snapping like small electric heartbeats. Inside the staging room behind the podium, the board was waiting. Martin Hale was pale. Porter Briggs looked ready to pounce. Alexandra Martin began, "This is your last chance to use the prepared statement." Porter slid a folded paper toward her. "It affirms the company's commitment to safety while avoiding unnecessary alarm. No mention of design flaws, no mention of historical cases, no mention of Brooks. Of course," Martin added, "we can still discuss certain consequences if you go off script. Consequences, not a threat, a promise." Alexandra looked at the paper, looked at the two men guarding it, and in her silence she heard Lily's tiny voice from the night before airplanes should feel safe. She handed the statement back to Porter without opening it. "I won't read this." Porter's jaw tightened. "Then you're about to make a catastrophic mistake." "No," she said softly. "I'm about to correct one." She opened the door and stepped toward the light. On the stage, the microphones waited. A sea of reporters stared up at her, ready to dissect every breath. The board members lined the back wall, stiff as statues. She faced the camera's heartbeat drumming in her ears. "Good morning," she began. Her voice echoed through the atrium. "I'm here today to speak about the Aurora X program, and to speak truthfully." A ripple moved through the crowd. Phones lifted. Fingers hovered over keyboards. Alexandra continued, her voice steady. "During a recent test flight, the aircraft experienced a fuel imbalance warning. While the public narrative has been that this was a sensor issue, the actual data suggests a deeper systemic concern." Reporters leaned forward. "We have identified behavior in the fuel distribution system that warrants immediate action. Until a full investigation is complete, I am ordering all Aurora X aircraft grounded." A thunder of shutters erupted. Gasps swept the room like wind. Behind her, the board stiffened, caught in the very spotlight they'd hoped to avoid. Alexandra inhaled, her chest tight but steady. "There is more." The crowd quieted instantly. 7 years ago, she said, a young engineer raised concerns about a similar configuration in an earlier program. Instead of listening, we investigated him. We questioned his credibility, and we silenced him. Silence fell so sharply that even the HVAC hum became audible. That engineer's name, she continued, was Evan Brooks. Gasps again. Alexandra forced herself to keep going. "My father, Richard Vale, voted in the meeting that removed Mr. Brooks from his position. I grew up seeing him as a man of absolute integrity, and in many ways he was. But in this, he was wrong. The company was wrong." She felt the board behind her bristle, tiny movements, sharp breaths, anger tightening into restraint. "I will not repeat that mistake." Her voice softened. "I invited Mr. Brooks here today, not to blame, not to shame, but because truth must be spoken by those who lived it." She nodded toward the side entrance, and then Evan stepped into the atrium. He didn't look like a man ready to face the world. He looked like a father who hadn't slept enough, a working man in clean but humble clothes, a person who'd been knocked down once and had spent years learning how to stand again. But as he walked toward the podium, the crowd parted. Cameras swung. Something in the room shifted, a recognition that this was not a power play but an overdue moment. When he reached the microphone, he took a shaky breath. "Good morning," he said quietly, his voice rough but steady. A reporter shouted, "Do you blame Vale Aerospace for what happened to you?" Evan paused, then shook his head. "No, I don't blame the entire company. I don't blame every engineer or technician. I blame fear. I blame the culture that punished people for speaking up." He glanced at Alexandra, then back to the audience. "I didn't come here for an apology. I came because airplanes should land safely, because engineers shouldn't have to choose between telling the truth and feeding their families. And because my daughter," his voice cracked just barely, "deserves to grow up knowing her dad didn't stay silent twice." Camera shutters clicked like falling rain. "I'm not here to fight," he whispered. "I'm here to help fix what's broken." When he stepped back, the room didn't know what to do. Until one person no one knew who began to clap, then another, then more. Soon the applause spread like a rising tide, strong, uneven at first, then building into something loud, emotional, undeniable. But one set of hands clapped louder than all the rest. Lily, small, bright, fearless, was standing on a chair near the front, guided by May's steady hands. Her little palms hit together with the force of a child who believed applause could save the world. And in that moment, maybe it could. Alexandra felt the tears sting but refused to let them fall. Because it wasn't over. When the applause softened, she stepped forward again. "Thank you," she said. "But today is not the ending. It's the beginning of accountability." Her voice turned resolute. "This company will cooperate fully with regulators. We will correct this system. And, effective immediately, we will establish independent protections for engineers and employees who raise safety concerns." The board behind her shifted uncomfortably. Some investors stormed out of the lobby. Reporters were already typing furiously. Legal counsel muttered something sharp under his breath. But none of that mattered in the moment. What mattered was the truth, finally spoken, finally heard. And the little girl beaming proudly at her father from the front row. As Alexandra stepped away from the podium, breath trembling with adrenaline and relief, she knew she had crossed a line. A point of no return. The world would either break her, or finally understand her. But she also knew one thing with absolute certainty. The truth was finally louder than the silence. For 3 days after the press conference, the world wouldn't stop talking. Headlines swung wildly from harsh critiques to fierce praise. Market analysts speculated, pilots spoke out, engineers debated, and families of passengers sent thank-you messages to the company's public inbox. Cable news replayed Alexandra's speech in loops, slowed it down, dissected every breath. Social media polarized instantly. But underneath the noise, something quieter, something steadier began to take form. A shift, a reckoning, a possibility. The board convened an emergency session, of course. The vote of no confidence was motioned, debated, politicked. But something unexpected happened. Representatives from the National Pilot Union submitted a letter urging the board to retain Alexandra. So did the Aircraft Engineers Association, and the FAA, and consumer safety groups. And, shockingly, several high-profile investors who said transparency was the only path forward in a world tired of corporate cover-ups. The board resisted, fought, tried to maneuver, but the tide had moved. The vote failed. Alexandra kept her seat. With one caveat, she would oversee a complete safety reform of the company. She accepted without hesitation. Meanwhile, the aviation community turned its attention to Evan. For years, he had been a ghost footnote rumor, cautionary tale. Now, reporters requested interviews. Engineering teams reached out with apologies. Universities invited him to speak. And the director of an independent safety institute emailed him 2 words, "We believe you." Evan declined most requests, keeping his focus on Lily and on helping Alexandra implement the reforms she promised. Fame had never interested him. Redemption wasn't a spotlight, it was a steadying breath. Still, when the FAA formally corrected the historical record publicly acknowledging Brooks had raised valid concerns years earlier, Evan sat very still, holding the letter in both hands. His mother cried quietly in the kitchen. Lily brought him a paper airplane she had colored gold. "That's for being brave twice," she told him. He hugged her tightly. A month later, Aurora X had been fully re-evaluated. Engineers dismantled the fuel system, ran simulations, rebuilt pathways. Evan contributed as a consultant, working carefully, methodically, without ego. The design flaw was corrected. The software patched. The final FAA certification restored. The day the plane earned its new clearance, the test pilot radioed back in a voice that carried unmistakable pride, "Aurora X glides like it knows it's been forgiven." The metaphor wasn't lost on anyone. A week after the certification, Alexandra invited Evan, Lily, and May to the Aviation Heritage Museum. Quiet on weekdays, peaceful under the high arch ceilings where historic aircraft hung suspended like memories that would never fall. Lily ran ahead, her boots tapping lightly on polished concrete as she zigzagged between exhibits. "Daddy, Daddy. Look, this one's called the Sky Ranger. It has extra wings." Evan laughed softly. "Those are stabilizers, Bug." To Alexandra, the sound of their laughter was a warmth she had never expected to recognize. They stopped in front of the Hall of Innovation where portraits and plaques celebrated aviation pioneers. A new plaque had been installed just that morning. Alex hadn't told Evan. He read it slowly. Brooks Vale, Safety Institute. A commitment to truth, accountability, and the engineers who speak up even when silence is easier. Below that, 2 photographs. One of Richard Vale, one of a group of engineers including a younger Evan, half smiling, unaware his life was days from being derailed. Evan's lips parted. His breath trembled. "Alexandra, you didn't have to do this." "Yes," she said softly. "I did." She touched the edge of the plaque gently. "This isn't about rewriting history. It's about learning from it. My father wasn't perfect. Neither am I. But what he taught me about safety, what you taught me about courage, they belong next to each other." He swallowed hard, eyes glistening. "Thank you." Lily tugged his sleeve. "Daddy, look. You're in a museum. Does that mean you're famous?" He knelt, smiling. "No, sweetheart. It just means people listened." That evening, they gathered at Evan's apartment just as they had on quieter nights before the storm. May stirred pancake batter at the stove, humming an old tune that somehow made the tiny kitchen feel like the warmest room on earth. Lily sat at the table drawing a new airplane, this one labeled Honest Sky 2. Alexandra offered to help, but May waved her off. "Sit. You look like someone who hasn't rested in a month." Alexandra laughed. "That's accurate." When dinner was ready, Lily stood on her chair and raised her glass of orange juice with all the ceremony of a seasoned toastmaster. To Daddy, she declared for telling the truth, even when it hurt. Evan chuckled, embarrassed. To Alex, Lily continued turning toward her for being brave and listening. Alexandra felt heat rise to her eyes. "Thank you, Lily." And to airplanes that don't fall down, Lily finished triumphantly. Everyone laughed, rich relieved laughter that came from deep inside. They clinked glasses. For a long moment, the room glowed with something intangible, something fragile and fierce all at once. Healing, Alexandra realized. Not the loud kind that arrives in grand gestures, but the quiet kind like dawn light slipping through curtains. Later, Evan and Alexandra stepped onto the small balcony. The city hummed below 1,000 windows, flickering in the cool night. Somewhere nearby, someone practiced piano through an open window, the notes drifting up in soft spirals. Evan leaned against the railing. "When all this started, I thought I'd lose everything again." "You didn't," Alexandra said. "You rebuilt something stronger." He looked at her, then really looked. "You did, too." The wind lifted a strand of her hair. She brushed it back, feeling suddenly vulnerable. "The truth almost broke me." "I know," he said gently, "but sometimes the only way to land safely is to risk the turbulence." His words settled inside her like warmth spreading through cold bones. She exhaled, letting go of a weight she'd carried since the day she found the memo. "Evan, you saved people you'll never meet. You saved me first." His voice was softer now. "You gave me the chance to speak again." They stood in the quiet, the evening folding around them. Then, as if drawn by something inevitable, he reached for her hand. She didn't pull away. Their fingers intertwined, simple, unhurried, honest. A connection that didn't need labels. a beginning that didn't need certainty, a truth neither had to fear. Behind them, Lily giggled in her sleep. The heater clicked softly. A passing plane hummed overhead, a steady, confident sound. A safe sound. Alexandra closed her eyes and let the moment settle. Some endings aren't endings at all. Some are landings, smooth, steady, exactly where you're meant to arrive. Sometimes the bravest thing a person can do is simply tell the truth. Evan learned that courage isn't always loud. Sometimes it's a quiet choice made in the dark long before anyone else believes you. And Alexandra learned that real leadership isn't about perfection. It's about having the heart to correct what's been broken, even if you didn't break it yourself. This story reminds us that honesty can shake the ground beneath us, but it can also rebuild a safer world for the people who come after. It reminds us that every voice matters, from the CEO in the boardroom to the janitor fixing a pipe to the little girl asking a question only a child is brave enough to ask. And now I want to hear from you. Have you ever witnessed a moment when someone stood up for what was right, even when it cost them something? Have you ever lived through a situation where telling the truth changed everything? Or maybe you simply want to share what this story meant to you. Tell your story in the comments, and while you're there, let us know. Where in the world are you listening from? I'd love to see our community light up from every corner of the map. If this story touched your heart, if it made you think, or if it gave you even a little hope tonight, please consider subscribing to the channel. It helps these stories reach more people who might need them. Thank you truly for spending your time with me today. Your support, your presence, and your voice here mean more than you know. Until the next story, take care of yourself, take care of each other, and keep choosing the truth even when it shakes the sky.